Hi everyone, welcome to a new Finboot interview. I'm Flavia Sales, your host of this interview, and I have here a very special guest, Harry Marshall from OpenAtlas. So thank you so much for accepting this interview, Harry.
Anytime. We're in beautiful Barcelona, so I'm always happy to come down here.
Yeah, we are happy to have you here. So this is a very special interview because we have in partnership very soon. And I would like for you first to introduce yourself and of course talk about who Open Atlas is, what do you do, the mission behind the company, the history as well. So please go ahead.
Thanks for having me. I never really know where to start because in some way, a lot of different aspects of my life professionally and elsewhere have contributed to the founding of this company, which we did 2 years ago. But I think a good place to probably start is when the idea was first conceptualized. So around about 2 years ago, my business partner and I, he's also a very good friend, Ezekiel, very smart guy.
Hi, Ezekiel.
If you're watching, we were. It sounds a bit like a joke, right? A machine learning expert being him, and a business-minded individual walk into a bar. What's going to happen if that in that combination?
That's the beginning.
Exactly. I mean, with that formula, what's going to happen when you jam these two people into a bar and get them to every other week think about new business ideas? And I think the answer to that is, at first, you're going to get a lot of bad ideas. So we had a few ideas or concepts of what we could do, because I think we both just, we're at the age where we wanted to do something. Eventually, though, around about 2 years ago, we started to discuss and think about the European Union's deforestation regulation, which is many things, but it's trying to minimize the deforestation impact of European consumers by regulating a number of new requirements, one of which is that all producers of a number of in-scope commodities need to prove that they haven't contributed to deforestation since December 30th, 2020. So with this in mind, we were thinking, how are these companies, how are these producers, how are these farmers, how are these consumers going to be able to prove this? And fortunately, I didn't have a solution, but Zeke did have a good solution, which was a geospatial remote sensing solution, which essentially looks over time through a number of different satellite images, hundreds of satellite images of a certain plot, and then runs analysis through machine learning to tell us whether or not there is a high, medium, or low risk of deforestation in the past, and also whether or not what are the underlying contributors to that as well? Is there any evidence of these producers overlapping with indigenous lands or world protected areas? Essentially trying to tell us whether or not this produce from this area, be it a cup of coffee or the coffee beans that go into a cup of coffee, or the wood in these chairs, for example, has contributed to deforestation. And is it legally compliant with the European Union?
So you thought that in a conversation at the bar.
Yeah, I mean, that was the first conversation.
When I go to the bar, just drink.
Yeah, I mean, we were also drinking, to be fair. And if anything, that's the secret sauce underneath.
Probably. That's a great idea behind and a great story as well. Thanks for sharing that.
No worries.
Yeah, so you mentioned the EUDR and the solution you were thinking around that. If I'm not wrong, is called...
Oh, our solution. It's called VANTAGE-X. It's had a few name changes, but I think we like VANTAGE-X. Don't ask me where that came up. Not at a bar, in a back room somewhere.
Right. So it's a remote sensing technology, and so we are now partners. And would you mind to go a little bit deeper and explain the technology and the integration with our technology, blockchain based for digital traceability? And of course, they are together because we want to create a solution to help clients comply with the EUDR. Would you mind to go deeper?
Yeah, certainly. I think one of the reasons why we're so excited to work with Finboot is that we're very confident in how our technology works, but a key, one of the reasons why we're very excited to work with Finboot is that we're very confident in how our technology works in analyzing a plot, a producer anywhere around the world,
Right.
or thousands or tens of thousands of them. But the question that we can't answer on our own is, where should we look? So the partnership with Finboot aims to solve that on one sense from a technological standpoint for us, which is using your traceability technology, blockchain enabled. We're able to know where in a supply chain things are coming from. And once we get to the end, or once you get to the end, we step in and we run the analysis on that final thing. So imagine all of these links in the chain. Then when we get to the end, these, blockchain-enabled links in the chain, once we find out who the producers are, we have the technology to run the analysis, see if there's been deforestation, see if they're legally producing, and then do that. So it really is something else that I find very exciting about the value proposition of working with Finboot is that there are not a lot of integrated end-to-end services on the market. So the European Union is impacting billions and billions of dollars of commodities around the world. And all of these producers and the European side importers need to prove due diligence, right?
Yep.
Now, what you do, the traceability aspect, is a specialization that we couldn't do. We do not have the expertise in doing that. Even if we wanted to, I don't think we would do as good a job as you, not by a long way.
Thank you.
And then on the other side, what we do is very technologically challenging as well. It requires its own specialization over here. So I think compared to some other offerings on the market, what is really powerful about ours is that you've got two best-in-class solutions coming together. You've got the best at geospatial, the best at traceability, coming together into one solution, as opposed to getting a pretty good version of this and a pretty good version of that. It really is creating a best-in-class solution.
Yeah, I totally agree. And especially because Finboot has, a lot of different applications, not only the digital traceability can be used for different projects and areas within the same company. We have been working with companies, for example, to track, as you said, coffee, but also chemicals and also fuels. So you have so many different products and raw materials that you can track within this supply chain. And it's at some point, as you mentioned, the EUDR compliance need you for telling where this raw material came from and if it's related or not to deforestation and where you're coming in.
Yeah, I think as well, this will be the beginning of a very beautiful thing. No, this will be the beginning of quite a cool technology integration between us, right? Because deforestation is the beginning, right? You raised the good point. If we're looking in different industries across different spaces, we can look at other capabilities as well, right? We can start to look at the biomass there. We can start to look at the health of the land. We can start to make predictions around that as well. All of this is possible thanks to the combination of these two different solutions as well. So I think EUDR is a fantastic springboard into what I could only imagine are other applications in the near future as well.
Yeah, it's at the beginning of a beautiful partnership. And you touched a point in such an important aspect of this partnership regulations, right? We know that European market and the European Commission is leading the sustainability aspect on regulations, and we're talking about EUDR. We had yesterday a pretty busy day on the European Parliament.
Yeah.
They were voting on the EUDR delay. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think because it's so recent, the vote yesterday, at least I've had a hard time. I had a sleepless night last night thinking about it, which was, I wonder, what does this actually mean? And I think at this stage, there's a lot of signals, of course, of changes that may come in time, but also what are the fundamental changes that we should accept right now? So it seems likely, very likely to me, that there will be a 12-month delay to the regulations enforcement.
I think so. I think too.
Yeah, very brave of us to make those claims. But I think at this stage, if there wasn't a delay, that would be really catastrophic for the industry and for everyone, because EUDR compliance requires a lot of work, and I don't think many companies will be there in the next month and a half. So that is a good thing. I think what's been on my mind for a while is that regulation should be ambitious, but also practical. So any changes that they make to the regulation at this stage, I think should be practical, but it shouldn't undermine the ambition of the regulation, which is at its core to reduce the deforestation impact of European consumers and by effect instigate a positive change around the rest of the world for there to be less deforestation-derived products. So I think any changes that are made now need to stay true to that. Some of the amendments that are still being tabled are questionable, and we could talk for a long time about that. But I think at some level, I do still trust the European Parliament and the Council and the Commission to make the right choices. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. But I think at the very least,
I have the feeling that you were talking about the no risk countries.
Yeah.
Amendment,
Correct.
right?
Well, so a lot of the proposed amendments did get taken off the table prior to voting. The ones that stayed on won for the most part, so they will be considered by, I believe, the European Council next, or the Commission. I'm not European, so I'm not perfect on the political workings of this union, but I think, the main thing that they're carrying forward is the proposal for no-risk countries. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking yesterday, as I was sitting at my computer, what is a no-risk country when it comes to deforestation?
Yeah.
You know, I could accept a low-risk country, and I think that seems prudent and appropriate, but no-risk it's a bit of a misnomer for what? And, you know, we could talk about who those no-risk countries are likely going to be. There's talk of European Union countries being the only ones, which opens up its own can of worms of kind of geopolitical tensions, and possibly the inclusion of China for one reason or another as well. So time will tell. Perhaps in 2 months' time we'll do another interview and we'll have some more firmer thoughts instead of predictions on this.
And to update this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Episode 2.
Definitely. The delay was voted and this was approved. Of course, they need to also define the deadline, the new deadline, because we don't have a date at this point. Mm-hmm. I am assuming that probably it's going to be delayed at least 12 months, right? But what we are seeing with our customers, because we have projects going on about EUDR, and they are not changing their plans. And we, as Finboot, we agree on that they shouldn't, because what we are seeing is that if it's delayed or not, or if some amendments are going to be changed or not, you still need to collect the data. And this is the important and harder part of this process.
Yeah.
Because collecting data, it's the hard part.
Yeah.
And to process all the data and collaborate with your stakeholders. You have a lot of different companies in a value chain. And if everyone needs to provide you with information, to add this in a partner portal, or even to prove their own statement on their claims and all that. And I think we should only think like, all right, now I have more time to collect, to test, and do everything the correct way, to when the system is ready and approve it, I just can send and I have peace of mind because I have done this the correct way.
No. And I think in my experience of watching or observing businesses acquire this data from their supply chains, it'll take longer than you think it will. Acquiring this data will take longer than you think it will. It will be messy. It will need to be cleaned. This is what I mean when I say a delay to the regulation seems like it is practical. Because even if you start right now, I think 12 months is going to be tight anyway. I think my dad always says, don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today. And I don't think it's what you can do, but what you should start doing today as well.
Yeah. We can see, for example, some clients that they are already starting this data collection. And there's some internal question they need to answer. For example, it is this traceability need for batch level or unit.
Yeah.
Or, so those questions only will appear when you start the process. But if you don't start now, you're not going to comply if it's this year or the next year or the other one. So just begins.
Yeah, it's all about, I think, the unknown unknowns. And there are plenty of unknown unknowns when no one has done this before. When you haven't looked into your supply chains, there's so much that you're unaware of. So I think to that respect, start figuring out those unknowns today.
Yeah, and it's nice because we were getting to the subject that I think is very relevant is the real use cases, right? I was mentioned that we have some projects with EUDR. Do you have any feedback from your clients, and could you go and give us like a debrief from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've slightly alluded to it already, which is essentially, it is going to be trickier than you think to gather the data, right? I like to think of EUDR compliance as a bit of it's a marathon, or it's a race of some description. And the first hurdle is quite a high hurdle, and that is gathering the data. So that's not anything that we do specifically. We don't go into the supply chains. That's more of where a solution like yours helps that process a lot. It provides the frameworks for what data to get, how to get it, how to get in touch with suppliers, etc., and so forth. But what we have done on our side to ease that process, so of course, to figure out where your suppliers are, at the end of the day, you need some geographic data. You need a polygon, or you need a latitude and longitude that tell you where in the world this bag of coffee has come from. And when you have that information, then we can start to do some stuff with it. But if you've ever seen geographic data, it's a long line of numbers. There's decimal points throughout it. Latitudes, longitudes can be mixed around. It's I can understand it. I work in the industry, and it's confusing. If you've never dealt with it before, it's going to be even more confusing. So we've built aspects to our technology that will tell you, at least if there is an error, where that error is. It'll allow you, as well with Finboot, we've created integrations into your service, which essentially allow your end customers the ability to check, all right, now I know my supply chain is in Uganda, but suddenly a few of them are coming from Australia when I load them up, and from Europe or from South America. Why is that? And very often it's got to do with, a latitude and longitude are in the wrong position. So we're making steps to, of course, make that easier for end customers, because at the end of the day, this first hurdle that I was talking about is going to be a relatively big one. And once we have the data, the following years, I think, will be a lot easier, as there is more of a saturation of this data being available. But, the first cut is the deepest. I think someone said this, or the hardest. So, it will take a bit of, this is what we mean, a 12-month delay. Use that time wisely, because there will be hurdles ahead of you that you're going to struggle with. We can build technological solutions to them as much as possible, but there is going to be legwork that is required, and hard work from customers, suppliers, everyone along the value chain as well.
Yeah, what we are seeing is exactly that. It's not only that about the technology integration, but the part of the business as well. So you are going to need to have some internal discussion around your plan, and then of course the technology can help with that. But you are going to gather everyone, your partners, your providers, your clients, and sit down with all that and say, all right, let's see with the commodities we are going to track down, with products within our portfolio we have to comply, and all these questions only will appear when you start the project.
I think that is very true.
Definitely. I think this is a very nice partnership, not only for us but for our clients. And I would like to talk about what made you choose Finboot. Where did we stand out that made you choose Finboot as a partner? Because I know that, of course, EU has other partners, but what made you choose?
Yeah. So I think I touched on this earlier, right? So for us to do our job correctly, we need those links in the chain to be correct. If they send us to the wrong place, or if we don't get to the end, then there's nothing that we can do. So we have a lot of reliance on your technology and on anyone that we work with in that respect. So You'd be familiar with this phrase, maybe, which is in the data processing world, which is rubbish in, rubbish out, right? Now, if we're working with another traceability company or we're working directly with a customer and there's just garbage coming in, then our analysis is going to be worthless as well. We're going to look in the wrong place. We won't have the correct polygons. It could be, encompassing more land either side as well. Any of these things, or we may just not get the information at all, which means, not even garbage in, but nothing in, nothing out. So I think why working with Finboot is so exciting is because we have a lot of trust in how you do your side of this piece. As I say, those linkages in the chain, for us, they're not just a nice to have, they're absolutely fundamental to us being able to do what we do. Fortunately for us, our analysis is highly automated. It's transparent. You can see why it is, but also we can scale it up to tens of thousands of plots in 10 minutes or less. All right. So the issue on our side is we've got this really good engine room, but we need the inputs to put anything out and to make valuable submissions to customers as well. So to that respect, working with Finboot, who we know is best in class, I was looking behind me. There's a trophy there that Finboot received for one thing or another already. And, that is just testament to the product that you guys have and the ability to funnel in the data that we need to run the analysis that we do as well.
Yeah, funny you mentioned the award. This is a supply chain award.
Exactly.
Definitely. So I appreciate what you have been talking about Finboot. I remember that we wrote together a blog post for a webpage where you mentioned the difference, why remote sensing is not open source, right?
Yeah.
Solution is not so appropriate for the EUDR compliance. I would like to take some minutes on that because I know that we have some time still. So would you mind to explain the difference and why remote sensing is more appropriate?
Certainly. So it's our company, OpenAtlas. Again, it's a bit of a misnomer insofar as our data isn't open source, but I just thought it sounded like a terribly cool name, OpenAtlas. But the question of, what is open data in the realm of remote sensing or deforestation verification? So these are publicly available databases that are somewhat mapped to the entire world. And they tell you where forest is, forest could be. As I say, these are not running analytics necessarily. Once a year, they will map the entire world. And that revisit rate obviously has some downsides, but also some upsides. Open data in any industry is incredibly valuable for a number of reasons. I think also what these, with respect to the deforestation space, what these open data sources have done for the last 10 or 15 years is incredibly impressive. But they're doing that in a voluntary market. Or they were doing it in a voluntary market. This is another question that I like to pose to people, which is how many trees need to be cut down for there to be deforestation?
Yeah.
How many trees are in a forest? All of these different things, If a tree falls over in a forest and no one's there, do you hear it? Stuff like this, very philosophical. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that deforestation in a voluntary market, so for the last 10 or 15 years, is abstract. You can define what deforestation is yourself. And you can make a model that works to those definitions reasonably well. What the European Union has done with the European Union Deforestation Regulation is they've said, no more abstract interpretations of what deforestation is. We're going to set it at
some rules.
set some rules. Rules in this space are good though, because they tell you this is a forest, that's not a forest, this represents deforestation, this is what you're looking for. So the difference between open data and proprietary solutions like ourselves is that they are working specifically to the European Union's deforestation regulation and the specifics within that, which allows us to minimize the risk of non-compliance. Instead of looking generally, we minimize the risk of non-compliance by providing a more accurate to the regulation, to the rules, analysis around that. Which I don't want to undercut these other services on the market because they are remarkable for doing something and they're great indications of deforestation. But ultimately, if you are importing 100 containers or one bag of coffee to the European Union, there is not a margin of error for there to be an incorrect assessment there. Of course, you want to stand by a methodology that is transparent, that is effective, the bar is very high, because ultimately, as the EU has made clear, they're going to be auditing this at a very high bar eventually. Between 1 and 9% of all shipments are going to be checked when it comes into enforcement. You want to make sure that you're not on the wrong side of that, because the fines, be they reputational or actually just monetarily fines, are huge and they're not insignificant to a business. So comes down to that. If I could surmise that point, I guess. Open data is very good, but it's like painting with a very wide brush, And when it comes to the regulation, the EUDR, what you want to do is take out an easel, I guess, and a very fine paintbrush and really paint within the lines and make sure you're doing everything perfectly. And to that effect, solutions like ours are more specific to that.
It's more tailored, right?
Tailored, yeah.
And as you mentioned at the beginning as well, VANTAGE-X also has more tools than only the remote sensing for the deforestation to compliance with the EUDR. I mean, looking ahead, you have more opportunities to work with and to help clients on different sustainability initiatives. I know that you have something related to provide tools for ESG or indigenous insights. So would you give me some...
Sure. So when we were looking at the European Union regulation, it's funny, you just can pore over a regulation. It's very transparent. It's all written there in many different languages. And we were looking at the different things that we could do. The deforestation, checking where trees are being chopped down, is obviously, or where they're, not
the basic.
Well, that's the obvious one. But as we started to work with the regulation more, we realized that if we know where we're looking in the world, we can rely on other databases and also get more information, insights into other parts of the regulation. So not just the deforestation, but are these goods legally produced as well? So speaking towards the legally produced, we do a check to see if there is an overlap with any world protected areas, so national parks, anything like this. Has this bag of coffee come from a national park, which would make it illegal or something like this? Also, does it overlap with any known indigenous persons maps around the world as well? So
protected areas.
Yeah, both of the protected areas. So essentially just to provide more information around the legality of a product, not just as it relates to the deforestation risk.
But also local laws.
Local laws, yeah. And we're working on some other stuff at the moment where we can try and do more around this to paint more of a picture. Again, just providing Finboot's customers with more and more insights that will help them in their EUDR compliance journey. So giving them the raw data and giving them, aggregated risk assessments as well to say whether or not that this plot of land should be continued to be imported into the EU or not, or whether or not you should diversify that.
Provide them with information for them not only to comply with a specific regulation, but if they are really being sustainable at all.
Yeah.
And be ahead of that, right?
Yeah. The closing piece there as well. I think the European Union, the EUDR, is targeting environmental, social and governmental sides of any business that it impacts as well.
Exactly.
Right? And I think some of the amendments that we were talking about around the regulation maybe are going to undercut the environmental, the social, and possibly the government. But I think essentially it's important to recognize that this regulation is not just looking at the environmental side, but also the social and the governance of these plots as well.
So I think we covered everything today. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. And I want to thank you for watching us and see you next interview.